looks like you're a charter captain, Tall Tales on the east end. Give us a little background on yourself.
Yep. So, running tall tail sport fishing now out of the Eastern Basin for 21. This will be 21 years. Um, quote unquote part time, but we still manage to fish quite a lot all summer. So, we're usually going 3 days a week, if not more. Uh, yeah, been, I fished the western end for the month of May, and then the rest of the year out of Oswego. I did started my career in the Little Salmon River, but we moved a little bit west to Oswego. The access to deeper water was a little more attractive. So that's about it. I also started a new business a couple years ago, marine surveying. There's a large need along the South Shore of Lake Ontario for it. We saw the need and jumped in, and it's been working out very well.
Yeah, that's really what we'd like to hear about today. Tell me a little bit about that and how you got started with that.
Uh, Vince can attest to this as a charter captain. We don't always have the greatest access to marine mechanics and repairs and all those things, and you end up being a jack of all trades. You got to take care of your own vessel and just school of hard knocks, I guess, when it comes to fixing stuff, and just get real comfortable with boats and feel like you gain the knowledge and you want to help other folks with that. And marine surveying was the way for us to do that.
Can you talk about that a little bit? What does that mean? When you do a marine survey, what are you doing?
Yeah, so it's similar. Like you buy a house, you get a home inspection. It's very similar when it comes to boats. You hire us when you're purchasing a boat. We go stem to stern on the boat, checking all the systems. In the end, you get a full report of getting some feedback there. Full report on the boat when you're done. Hopefully you're present and for the survey. You can learn a little bit about your boat while we're going through it. There's various levels of findings. We prefer to label them A, B, and C. A being like a life and limb safety issue. B's are something you should probably repair sooner than later, and C's are maintenance items that you should keep your eye on, and those kind of items. So
Brian, can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you, Vin.
Okay. So you and I discussed a few days ago things you could help people out with.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you see when they rig boats when you're doing a survey that are probably hurting their fishing?
Wiring, I would start there. Wiring in boats seems to be, I guess there's not a good term for it, but just lackluster. If guys don't have good connections on their electronics or their downriggers or properly fused. So those kind of things for sure. Believe it or not, you see a lot of equipment get mounted, and under gunnels there's no washers. They just put a bolt in the nut and call it good. Well, that might be good for a year or two, but you got this vessel for 5, 6, 7, 8, even 10 years down the road, it's really going to wear and start moving that glass around.
So what are some of the things, I know part of your training was getting into things that could end up putting people in peril. What would you say the number one thing is wiring wise that could cause a fire or a problem out when you're out on the water?
So improperly grounded, improperly fused, I would say are the two biggest things. Manufacturers recommend a fuse size for a reason. They're not just doing it to put it out there. That if it needs a 20 amp fuse, you got to put a 20 amp fuse to it. I would say that's probably the biggest item.
Brian, you talked about this being a service that people use when they're going to go out and buy a boat. But what about, let's say somebody's just owned a boat for a while and, we just want to make sure everything's okay. How many of those type of inspections do you do where it's somebody who's not trying to buy or sell, they just want you to go through their boat?
We get a couple every year. I wouldn't say it's a lot. We probably get 2 to 4 of those a year. They just, hey, can you come take a look? Tell me what's going on. The other component to this business, which I would say is probably 70% of what I do, is marine insurance. Insurance underwriters are requiring a survey every 5 years for charter captains. So in order for the charter captains to keep their insurance, they have to present a survey and usually complete those A finding items that I find during the survey. So that probably keeps me the busiest. I've been around the South Shore for 20 years. All the guys know me, and I guess they feel comfortable bringing me in to help them out.
Well, I can speak to that. Brian's got really impeccable credibility. He has not been caught deflating footballs or anything like that, so that helps in that kind of a business.
So you talked a little bit about wiring there, but probably the thing that these guys are most worried about when they're going out are those engines, those transmission type of things. What do you look at when you're looking at those things?
So we don't dive in real deep to the engines. We look for visual stuff, oil leaks, those kind of items. We typically recommend, if you are looking at a vessel that's up there in hours a little bit, to get a mechanical survey from a qualified marine mechanic. And in those cases, they'll do compression checks, leak down checks. We do take oil samples and transmission oil samples, and we can send those out to a qualified lab, and they come back, with metal contents and those kind of things. I do have 1 or 2 customers that want to get on a cycle of samples. So every 2 years, they'll take samples. We'll send them out, get those reports back.
What about the boat itself, the hull, those types of things? How do you take a look at those?
So we use a phenolic hammer, which is really, you use your ear for those balsa cord hulls, and in areas, those manufacturers that use balsa cord can get wet. It makes a different sound. Like, if you're looking for a stud in the wall and you're tap, 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 and you hear that pitch change, that's kind of what we're listening for. We also use a moisture meter that gives us moisture readings within the glass itself. It kind of lead us down that road of hey, you got a wet spot here, or you got a structural issue here. Yeah, it's the whole process is interesting.
What's something that people can do just to keep their boat, maybe a couple of tips that you can offer, just to keep people going and not having issues, maybe some common things that you see that could be preventable?
Preventable, I would say keep your terminations on your wiring clean. Do your oil changes. If it's every 100 hours, make sure you're on it every 100 hours. If you have a good mechanic, just be in touch with him. Do your simple stuff every year. Cap, rotor, plugs, wires. 1 year, if not every 2 years, depending on how many hours you're putting on your boat. That way, you don't run into something in the middle of July when you really want to be fishing. Those are the simple things.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Brian. When is kind of the busy time of year for you? When are you doing these things the most?
So April and early May and I would say October. So before the boats go in for the most part, and once the boats all come out for the most part, We get a little blip in June and July, usually with our non-fishing folks who are just getting into purchasing a boat. But as far as fishermen goes, April, this winter, especially last couple winters, we've been blessed, had some warmer weather. We could tackle a insurance survey or two in March, even did one in February. If the boat's in heated storage, we can do it then. But typically we need 3 days above freezing before we can do a survey, because if the boat's frozen, it's going to give us some false readings. So I anticipate our April to be very busy this year. My list is quite long already for as soon as this weather breaks.
How long does it take to do a survey?
An insurance survey on average for, say, a 31 Tierra, which is probably one of the most common ones we do, is 3 to 4 hours of physically being on the boat. And then there's the report writing afterwards of 2 hours, usually 2 to 3 hours. A 40-footer with a bridge, you can add a couple more hours to both. A pre-purchase survey is going to take all of that. If we're probably on a 40-footer for 8 to 10 hours, with half of that time later on for writing the report as well. So it all depends really on the size of the boat.
I'm not going to make you throw anybody under the bus here, but you see a bunch of boats. You see a bunch of boats that have been used and been out there. What's a boat that you could recommend to somebody going, hey, this is a boat that seems to hold up really well. When we do these surveys, we don't see as many issues with these types of boats. What's a boat you would recommend to somebody?
I would say right now the hottest boat, at least on the South Shore Lake Ontario for fishermen, most charter captains are starting to jump to them, is the 31 Tierra. You know, for the longest time, we had the 27 Sport Crafts, 28 Bajas, 31 Bajas. Those boats are really starting to age out. They're just getting too old to try and fix back up. But a 31 Tierra, I would say, for a guy with a family that's looking for a little cabin, maybe stay overnight on once, or over a weekend, a Friday, Saturday night at the marina, have a good time, efficient with fuel, those kind of things. I would say 31 Tierra. We don't
Vince?
do a lot of trailerable boats. We don't, surveying really starts 25 and up. It's not to say we don't do smaller boats. I've done some Lunds here and there and a couple other, aluminum boats, but primarily it's 25 feet and up.
Questions for Brian, Vince?
Yeah, Brian, thanks for piping in there on the comments.
Yes.
We had that discussion about Skamanias, and Brian does call his home port much closer to the hatchery, and he's saying no more Skamania stocking. So New York is out of that.
That is correct.
And did they give a reason? Or was it what I said, more just battling, getting steelhead in general?
That is, yeah, that was, I believe they told us it was room in the hatchery, Vin, being able to separate between steelhead and Skamanias. The last bunch of Skamanias that were done in the Little Salmon River, I'm going to say 8-9 years ago.
Was it a little bit of performance related too? It wasn't like they created that big summer fishery, right?
Correct. They weren't getting the return on them I think they wanted. Yep.
Brian, anything you wanted to talk about today before we let you go? Anything we didn't ask you about that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think you covered it. I just encourage guys, if you think you're going to have an insurance survey pop up, get with your surveyors sooner than later. Don't wait on their schedule, especially on years like this. One other thing, and they're really just starting to come to the South Shore, is indoor heated storage for a boat. I can't believe how nice these boats are that are in heated storage when they come out in the spring. It's a little bit more pricey, but if you're in for the long term with your boat, I think it's something guys should definitely think about doing. Maybe not every year, but every couple of years, really let that boat help dry out. And I come to that from my own experience. This year, I actually have my boat in heated storage because I'm doing a bunch of work on it, and I think it's going to be a regular quote unquote maintenance item for me is paying that extra for heated storage.
Tell me if people want to find out or find more about you or want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah. So for fishing, we're Tall Tale Sport Fishing on Facebook. No website. And for surveying, we are Captain's Choice Marine Surveying. Website is captainschoicemarineny.com. They can get a hold of me there and our Facebook page as well.
Awesome. He is Brian Garrett. Brian, really appreciate you joining us remotely today.
Yeah.
It was fun to have you. And that was a topic that we've never covered before. So
yeah.
Glad to have you.
Anytime, Chris.
Awesome.
We love to
Awesome.
chat about boats, man. It's one of our favorites. I know Vin and I talk regularly, and the majority, if we're not talking about deer hunting, we're talking about boats.